everybody, welcome back to my channel. So a couple quick notes before we get started on today's video. I have, as you probably clearly see, changed my channel name from Unapologetic Skincare and Beauty to my own name, Stephanie Harlow. The reason I did that was because a lot of people were saying it was confusing to be going to a skincare and beauty channel for true crime and mystery videos, and I get that. Totally get that. So when I first started these true crime kind of Mystery Monday videos, I was doing it only because I was interested in it and I wanted to do them. I never thought that they would take off or that anybody would be interested in them the way that I was. I didn't think they were going to be something people wanted to see. I just thought it was something I wanted to do. So I was gonna do it. And as much as I love beauty and makeup and skincare, I love true crime and psychological understanding of why people do the things they do, and mysteries and creepy supernatural things that keep you awake at night and make you wonder and make you think. So I'm just gonna keep doing what I do. I'm gonna keep making true crime videos, mystery videos, supernatural thrilling kind of videos, any kind of spooky thing that I feel like doing. I'll throw in some makeup and skincare videos every so often too, because that's also a passion of mine. So I'm excited to kind of go forward with my channel in the new path that I'm taking, being able to focus more on the things that I am really passionate about, knowing that there are people, you guys out there, who like it and want to watch it and like talking with me about it in the comments. I'm still a little sick, so my voice is kind of gravelly, but I think it's kind of, sexy sometimes. One more thing before we get started. Thank you guys so much for the feedback and the comments and the love that I've gotten from you. It's been amazing. I am so excited to have a community of people to be able to talk to about this stuff. And that's why YouTube is so great. You can only connect with a very small amount of people in your everyday life. Anybody who you work with or you kind of just know through family or friends. But because of YouTube, I can connect with people all over the world who have the same viewpoints or different viewpoints and grow and change and become better from that. And I love YouTube for that, and I love you guys for that. So thank you so much. Any success that I have, any growth that I have here on this channel is absolutely due to all of you. And I will continue to try to respond to every comment and be as interactive with you guys as I possibly can be, not only because I love it, but because you really deserve it. All right, let's get started on the video. So today is Halloween, and because of that, I wanted to put out a video that was kind of spooky and kind of mysterious. So today I decided to talk about something that's interested me since I was a little girl, because it's so mysterious and it's so weird and it's so just like unexplainable. What we're going to be talking about today is the lost colony of Roanoke. And if you've ever seen American Horror Story, you might have heard it mentioned in one of the seasons. What season was it? I forget what it was called. It was the season where they had like the reality show being taped in the haunted house. And then the ghost settlers came out from the woods and started murdering everybody. I don't remember what season that was or what it was called. But if you saw that season of American Horror Story, you will know what I'm talking about. So that has interested me long before I saw it on American Horror Story. So I pretty much knew all the details about it before even going into this video. So I'm super excited to share it with you. If you don't know about it and you haven't heard of it, stay tuned. If you do, stay tuned anyways, because you might hear something you didn't know before. So this story takes place, I don't know, should I call it a story because it's true? It's like a true story? Yeah, so we can call it a story. So this story takes place in July of 1587. 115 men, women, and children sailed from England and settled on Roanoke Island, which is an island off the coast of North Carolina. There was 87 men, 17 women, and 11 children, which I think it's kind of crazy, like 87 men and only 17 women. How did they actually think they were going to like populate this island with 87 men and 17 women? I think they were hoping to bring more settlers there later. I hope so, at least for the sake of the 17 women. Settlers had tried to occupy this area twice before, unsuccessfully. The first expedition was led by Sir Walter Raleigh, and if you recognize the name, it's because a place in North Carolina, Raleigh, North Carolina, was named after him. This boat full of people was only men because they were probably just trying to check it out at this point, and it really didn't go well. Within a year, it failed, and people think it's just because the men didn't know how to survive in the wilderness on their own. Like, they weren't used to it. They probably lived cushy lives back in England, and they didn't know how to make, something out of nothing in a new land. So they called it quits and went back home. Later on, Raleigh would send another person with some more settlers, and his name was Ralph Lane. Unfortunately, because of the timing and because they ran into bad weather on their way there, by the time they actually reached Roanoke Island, it was too late for the farming season, so they basically ran out of supplies pretty quickly. Since Lane didn't really feel like being on good terms with the natives, who could have helped him by teaching them farming methods or trading with them or sharing their food with them, they just couldn't survive, so they went back to England as well. One of the men who was on that failed expedition, his name was John White. He actually made a bunch of sketches of the island while he was there, the vegetation, the native people, just in general the area, making maps of it. And he must have really liked it or thought it had potential, because even after that expedition failed, he then came back later, so a third time trying to settle this place, and he came back with 115 men, women, and children that we talked about at the beginning of this video. It kind of is surprising to me that after so many failed attempts, there would be 115 people to find to bring back here. They lived in England at the time, and if you were a nobody in England, basically, you didn't have really anything to your name, you didn't have any power in government or stature in the community, John White could have lured you in by saying, hey, come with me to the New World. You can have as much land as you want, and you can be on the forefront of this new colony. You can be an important person in the government there and the political structure. So I can see how that would have been appealing to people who really didn't have anything in England at the time. So in July of 1587, they sailed over from England, landed at Roanoke, and they began to rebuild and repair the old houses from the previous two settlements and just build those back up. Now, what's interesting about the Roanoke colony is they would have been the first permanent settlement in the New World had they not vanished, because they did. They vanished into thin air, out of nowhere, gone. The first year in the new settlement was tough. These people were not used to being on their own and having to grow their own food and make their own way and build their own homes. There was happy moments, of course, such as John White's first granddaughter being born, Virginia Dare. She was born in August, the year that they came over, and she was the first English child to be born in the Americas. So she's a very important person in history. But there was tough times too. There wasn't enough food to go around. Everybody was kind of starting to wonder, like, what are we doing? How did we get here? Why did we agree to this? John, how'd you talk us into this? So John White was like, don't worry guys, I'm gonna sail back to England. I'm gonna get supplies. I'm gonna get more people. I'm gonna bring them back. We're gonna make this work. So he took off back to England to get supplies. He wasn't planning on being gone long, but unfortunately, war broke out with Spain while he was away. So England and Spain got into this big war. The Spanish Armada came out, it was big time. So he could not get back on the ship and sail from England back to the Americas, because Spanish fleets were all over the place and he would have been captured or killed even. He didn't feel like he could make it back there safely. It would be 3 years before John White made it back with the supplies and the other settlers to help the colony he'd left behind. When John White returned, it was August 18th, 1590. This would have been his granddaughter, Virginia Dare's 3rd birthday. The settlement was deserted. 115 people had vanished. There was nobody there. The houses even had been disassembled and taken down. There was nothing there. All John White found on that island were the letters C-R-O carved into a nearby tree and the word Croatoan carved into a fence post. White assumed that the settlers meant Croatoan Island, which was a nearby island, and he wanted to take a search party there to find the people he'd left behind. Unfortunately, as it does in those parts, the weather turned bad and they couldn't make it out into the sea to go to this island. The people he brought with him refused to get on a boat to sail to this island in the bad weather to look for these people. And the next morning, they just left. And this is the one part of the story that I struggle with. John White left behind his daughter, his wife, his granddaughter, his son-in-law at this island, and he was gone for 3 years. So already I would have felt like in his position that I'd failed these people by being gone for this long. And then the next day, weather's bad for one day, so you just give up and you leave. and you just go and you don't look for them anymore. I mean, if I'm John White and I have the persuasive powers to convince 115 people to settle on an island that has been failed to settle on before, I can convince a couple sailors to get on a boat or wait a couple of days to go find my family and all the people I'd left behind. I'm not really happy with John White in this situation. They did not send out a search party for these people for 12 years. I'm not lying. 12 years. So John White came back to Roanoke in 1590, and Sir Walter Raleigh did not send out a search party to find his lost colony until 1602. What? It was an expedition led by Sir Sam Mace and directed obviously by Raleigh. I think it was originally planned that the main objective was to find the missing settlers, but Sir Walter Raleigh also wanted to make his money. So before going to Croatoan, he instructed the crew members to basically stop along the way and just gather rare things that they could find on the islands that they could sell back in England, like sassafras. It's a wood. It's like a scented wood, I guess. So by the time they were done collecting their sassafras, the weather had, once again, big surprise, turned bad, and they could not make it onto Croatoan, so they turned back, they gave up. At this time, Raleigh was arrested and imprisoned in the Tower of London for treason. Quick little historical story about Sir Walter Raleigh. He was, real close with Queen Elizabeth, who was Henry Tudor, Henry VIII's daughter. Queen Elizabeth's basically the one who funded his journeys and encouraged him to settle the New World in England's name. And they were tight. They kind of got into it a little bit when he started dating and courting one of her maids of honor. She got really jealous, I guess, and she threw them both in the Tower of London for a couple of days. I don't know if there was something more going on with Queen Elizabeth and Raleigh that, history's forgotten about. But she got jealous, put them in the Tower of London. Eventually, Raleigh and Queen Elizabeth made up. But James I, Queen Elizabeth's successor, was not a Sir Walter Raleigh fan. So he didn't like him, and with good reason, because Queen Elizabeth's body wasn't even cold before Raleigh was front and center in a plot called the Main Plot to overthrow King James and replace him with his cousin Arabella Stuart. Within 4 months of James taking the throne, Raleigh was charged with treason and thrown in the Tower of London again. So by this time, needless to say, he was a little tied up and he wasn't directing any more expeditions to go find the lost colony. And I think at this point, I feel like they became really lost. Everybody kind of just forgot about them or didn't care anymore. In 1603, Bartholomew Gilbert led one final expedition to try to find the lost colony, and it did not end well at all. They meant to land in Chesapeake Bay, but once again, bad weather forced them to land in some unknown location, and the landing team, including Gilbert himself, were killed by natives. And the rest of the guys back on the ship, they were like, we're done with this, we're out, let's go back home. And they went back to England empty-handed. You can see what's kind of creepy and weird about this story. 115 people vanish into thin air. And with the people going missing is one thing, they might have moved, but the weird letters and words carved into the tree and the fence post were something else. Because even to this day, there's not a whole lot of proof that the settlers ever made it to Croatoan or stayed there. It hasn't really been supported by evidence or archaeological, clues. So where did they go? Well, there's some theories. Some of them are crazy, some of them are plausible, but let's go over them. Theory 1 is the colony was absorbed by friendly natives. So basically the natives took them in, helped them, took care of them. They became part of their tribe, part of their community. And this is kind of supported by European influences being seen in these tribes later by other Europeans. The Zuniga Map, which is a map and a manuscript drawn and written by the settlers of the Jamestown colony, it's a map of Chesapeake Bay and the Tidewater, Virginia area. And what you would see in this is basically these settlers of the colony writing down things they saw, drawing pictures of things they saw, drawing maps of areas and locations they went to and what they found in those locations, etc. This manuscript states that some settlers from the Jamestown colony witnessed white people living with the Iroquois tribe. And in another report, the Jamestown settlers report seeing 2-story stone houses in 2 other native villages. So basically these are English houses, right? We know that the Native Americans, they didn't use stones to build their houses. They didn't have two-story houses. These were European influences. So it's assumed that they learned these architecture techniques from the Roanoke colony. In the same area, archaeologists have dug up some other English artifacts, and they dug up like a rapier, which is a sword basically. They dug up a gold signet ring. They dug up a slate and pencil, so something that school children would use for writing their numbers and things like that. And these were all, once again, English items. They didn't belong to the native tribes. They were brought there by English men, women, or children. It's possible that the colonists encountered less than friendly tribes as well. As we already talked a little bit about, the former settlers hadn't really made friends of a lot of the native tribes. In fact, they kind of made enemies out of them. They were suspicious of them. And maybe one of those not so friendly tribes came upon the settlers and, killed all of them. I don't really believe that theory because the village was deserted. There was no sign of struggle. There weren't things overturned or dead bodies laying everywhere. The houses had been methodically taken down. Why would a group of natives, violent natives, come into the town or the settlement, kill everybody, and then clean everything up, and put everything right and then take down the houses? It wouldn't make sense. If they were just coming in to kill them and spill blood, they would have just murdered them all and then left. And when John White came back, he would have found a village full of dead bodies or skeletons instead of just a deserted ghost town. Cannibalism is another theory. There is actual proof showing that some of the settlers in the Jamestown colony had resorted to cannibalism in the past, so this wouldn't be too much of a stretch. When John White left to go get supplies from England, things were already kind of getting bad, and the settlers had not expected him to be gone for 3 years. They thought he would be gone, 4 or 6 months tops, and that they would have new and fresh supplies. So thinking this way, they may have just gone through all their food a little quicker than they would have had they known he was going to be gone for 3 years. There's proof showing from tree rings. So basically, when you cut down a tree, you can kind of read the rings in a tree. Not you or me, probably, but people who are actually trained to do that, they can read the rings in a tree, and it tells a story of, the history of the area the tree was in. So it showed that around that time and in the years following, there was a bad drought. So without water, you're not growing a lot of food, and everybody needs water to survive anyways. So they may have just gotten desperate and turned to cannibalism and began eating each other. That would explain why there was no bones or skeletons found, and maybe a couple settlers who were left after, eating everybody else, they just took off and went someplace else. Now, the creepiest theory is there's supernatural things at work here. And you may ask, why do you think that, Stephanie? Well, I think that because that word, Croatoan, over the course of history has had a lot of strange connotations and been associated with a lot of strange happenings. So were the settlers trying to let White know where they had gone by carving the road Croatoan into the fence post? Or were they trying to tell him that the Croatoan tribe had either come and done them harm or come and helped them? Let me tell you a little bit about this word, though, and how it's popped up over history in strange places. Hundreds of years later, famous poet and writer Edgar Allen Poe would go missing on a trip from Virginia to Pennsylvania. When he was found, he was incoherent and babbling and never was able to say where he'd been or what had happened on his deathbed. The last thing he said was the word Croatoan. Black Bart, infamous stagecoach robber, etched that word into his cell where he was imprisoned in 1888. When he was released from prison, he was never seen from or heard from again. In 1913, horror writer Ambrose Bierce, he disappeared in Mexico, and the bed that he slept in the night before he disappeared, it had the word Croatoan etched into the bedpost. And to me, the most creepy of all of these stories and the most connected was the ghost ship. The Carol A. Deering was discovered in 1921, basically shipwrecked by the Outer Banks of North Carolina, but the entire crew was gone. There's no sign of them, and no sign of them has ever been found. On the last page of the ship's logbook, the word Croatoan was written. The ship was discovered on the treacherous Diamond Shoals, which is really not far from the place that the settlers disappeared from. And Amelia Earhart reportedly wrote the word Croatoan in her journals before she disappeared. What's the weirdest thing about this is all of those stories have to do with somebody disappearing. Edgar Allen Poe disappeared somewhere between Virginia and Pennsylvania, and when they found him, he was basically insane. The stagecoach robber, he wrote it in his cell, and then he was never to be seen again. And Ambrose wrote that on his bedpost before disappearing in Mexico. And Amelia Earhart, she disappeared. We don't even know where she went. And the whole entire crew of the Carol A. Deering vanished without a trace, all connected to the word Croatoan. To me, that is the most interesting, creepy, supernatural centered theory, and I like it. I like it the best. Another theory is that Chief Powhatan had them all killed. So in 1607, the Jamestown settlers, I guess, were trying to figure out what happened to these people. And allegedly, Chief Powhatan confessed to John Smith. Yes, John Smith, like Pocahontas, John Smith. He confessed to John Smith that he had them all killed. He was allegedly even in possession of some of their belongings, and he told John Smith that he killed them because they had aligned themselves with a rival tribe. John Smith never said this himself, it's not written in his words anywhere, but the Jamestown secretary, William Strachey, I hope I said that right, William Strachey, that he was the secretary of the colony, so basically he wrote everything down and kept a log of everything. He's the one who wrote that this happened between John Smith and the chief, and he also wrote that the chief had some things in his possession that William had seen himself. So it's speculation because it's one man's point of view, but why would he lie? What would he have to gain from that? He was the secretary. It was just kind of his job to write things down and document everything. Another theory is that Spanish troops murdered the colonists, and I guess there would be a little bit of motive there because Spain and England were at war at the time, and there were Spanish settlers and soldiers inhabiting Florida at the time, which was pretty close to North Carolina. You could sail there pretty easily and quickly, even in those days. I don't think that this is the case, though, just because what was their motive in the end? It wasn't for land because they didn't stay there and take the land over. And to me, at this point, when land is the most valuable asset and France and England and everybody else are trying to settle as much of the New World as possible, that would have been the best motive. And they never ended up staying there or taking the land over. So unless they were just bloodthirsty and wanted to kill everybody, but then where did their bodies go? Once again, we have the same issue we have with the unfriendly native tribe. Why would the Spanish soldiers come in and kill everybody and, just tidy everything up and take their houses down and, take their bodies away? No bones were ever found. No skeletons were ever found. So you would think if 115 people had been murdered, even if their bodies had decomposed and there were skeletons left, you would find some of those bones. Another theory is that they attempted to sail back on their own. They were left with a small boat and they would have been able to fit them all, and maybe they tried to get back to England once they figured out John White wasn't coming back, or they were worried something had happened to John, so they got in the boat and tried to sail back. And they encountered bad weather, which isn't crazy because that seems to be all anybody encountered there. And then they got shipwrecked, but there was never any sign of any ship. There was no proof of a shipwreck, so it's a flimsy theory at best. And the Dare Stone. So the Dare Stone was a 21-pound stone found in 1937 by a Californian man who was traveling through North Carolina, and it was engraved with a bunch of weird markings and words and all sorts of weird things. But this is what the Dare Stones said. This is a hard name to pronounce, but side 1 says, Ananias Dare, and Virginia went hence unto heaven, 1591. So Ananias, I'm so sorry, I'm sure that's not how you say it, but he was John White's son-in-law, and then Virginia was obviously the first English child to be born in the New World, and John White's granddaughter. Anya Englishman Shoe, John White, Governor, VIA. Side 2 says, Father, soon after you go for England, we came hither. Only misery and war 2 year. Above half dead are 2 year more from sickness, been 24. Salvage with message of ship unto us. Small space of time, they a fright of revenge ran at away. We believe it not you. Soon after, ye savages feign spirits angry. Sudden murder, all save 7. Mine child, Arnianus is to slain with much misery. Bury Almiri 4 miles east this river, upon small hill, names write all there on rock. Put this there also. Salvage shew this unto you, hither we promise you to give greater plenty presents, EWD. That was hard to read, guys, and I will put these dare stones up. So you just kind of have to guess what Eleanor Dare, because that's who apparently or allegedly wrote on these stones, Eleanor Dare, who was John White's daughter. You kind of have to just guess what she means. I don't know if that's how they wrote back in the day, or if she just really wasn't maybe literate, or if it was really hard to write that much on a stone, maybe a combination of all three. Basically, let me sum it up. On the stone, Eleanor tells a story of the colonists moving further inland away from the ocean, but they were plagued with illness and violence from the natives, and only 7 settlers survived. If that's true, we still don't know what happened to these 7 settlers, Eleanor Dare being one of them. The dare stones, there was several more dare stones that were discovered after this original one, but those are all thought to be fake, because I guess there was like a reward out for more people who could find more stones, and so people just basically started making them up. But this stone, this first original stone, is thought to be real and authentic. So I don't know what to believe about that, but it's thought to be real and authentic. Virginia Dare, to me, is the saddest part of this whole story. Such an important and like momentous person, and nobody knows what happened to her. Nobody knows where she went or what became of her. She would have been 3 by the time her grandfather came back to find them. And we don't know how long she survived after they landed in Roanoke. We don't know how long any of them survived after landing in Roanoke. Was she murdered by a violent tribe? Was she taken in and welcomed in by a friendly native tribe? Did she die from malnourishment or dehydration? What happened to her? We'll never know. It's kind of crazy to me, though, to think that she could have lived and maybe been like adopted into a native tribe, and maybe, married one of the natives and had children with one of the natives, and her bloodline could still be alive today. That's so interesting to imagine that it could be that way, and those people wouldn't even know that they were descendant from such an important person. That's just interesting to me to think about Virginia Dare, this little girl, this important person. She had no idea, obviously, at the time that she would be such an impactful person. And there's places all over North Carolina that are named after her, counties, Dare County, lots of monuments in her name. So it's just kind of interesting. This little girl who may or may not have made it past her 3rd birthday, she never knew what an impact she was going to have on people in this country. It's possible, very possible. We will never know what happened to the lost colony of Roanoke. We'll never know what happened to these people. But it is still one of those mysteries that gets me even today. I love a good unsolved mystery, but it also drives me a little crazy. I want to know what happened. So if you like this story, you like this video, you're interested in stories like this, give the video a big thumbs up. Let me know in the comments you want to see more like it. Hopefully you guys have a very good Halloween. So it's supposed to pour all day and night, and my kids are going to be super happy about that. But what are you going to do? Trick-or-treating happens, rain or shine. Happens, rain or shine. I will see you guys next time. Hopefully my voice is back by the time Mystery Monday posts. Thank you guys again so much for being here with me. Stay kind and stay beautiful, and I will see you next time. Bye.